All right, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Leadership Blend Live podcast with your host, Ricardo D. Rice, and my co-host
Simone Shuri.
and correspondent,
Cameron Wallace.
All right, so we are back, and it's Friday, and I'm trying to think, how did my week go? Was this one of those wayward weeks, or was I focused?
I must have been wayward based
I think this is a wayward week. I wasn't really focused on much of anything. I was kind of just going along with the flow. So I don't know. You guys get to bring perspective to my life today. So what's on the rundown?
So I know that I want to talk about a lot of our state bills for the state of Georgia. There have been a lot of advancements and very important bills that we've been following. We are close to Crossover Day, which is a very important day for the General Assembly. It's the day in which a bill has to have been considered and passed by a chamber to move forward. So we will talk about the citizen's arrest statute that Georgia vowed to repeal after we watched the shooting death of Ahmaud Arbery last year. We will talk about raising the age, so a juvenile justice initiative, a little bit about prison conditions and women in prisons, about probation, and then also voting laws. Some of the voting, we talked before about the 70-plus voting laws that are being considered right now under the Gold Dome, and several of them have advanced, and we're going to talk a little bit about those too.
All right, so where y'all want to start at?
Let's start federally before we get into state stuff.
So on a federal level, we're going to look at the relief bill. We have a few updates about that. So first things first is that there are some amendments that have been put forth to kind of change the bill to fit the Republicans' agenda. And these amendments, there are 100 amendments that have been filed. And ultimately, the goal of these amendments is to kind of slow down the process of actually having the bill pushed out and actually having, stimulus checks paid out to everyone.
All right, for clarity purpose, because you just went in. So we're talking about the $1.9 trillion COVID-19 relief bill, the one that is harboring our unemployment benefits, that are harboring the stimulus checks. That's the bill he's talking about.
Yeah. So they've started a vote-a-rama process on the amendments, and this vote-a-rama process basically is where there are a series of amendments that are going to be voted on, and throughout this entire process, they have about a minute on each side to debate their side of the amendment, and then they have 10 minutes to vote on it. So the process for one amendment takes about 15 minutes, and there are about 100 amendments that have been filed. Mm-hmm. So that can clearly show how long this process will take.
Obscene.
So the more amendments that they have filed, which they are steady coming out with new amendments to the bill, the more amendments that are filed, the longer this process will take, which means the longer people.
And then it has to go back to the House because they have to agree to it. So both sides have to agree with the final.
So,
which the House had already passed.
Yeah,
the House had already passed
the amendments.
But after the amendments are made, the House has to receive the bill again to be voted on before it can go back to Biden to be signed.
So for clarity, people, that means these unemployment benefits and these checks, which a lot of this stuff runs out, I believe, this month. Yeah. So it's a hot mess. And I thought the issue was really the minimum wage hike, but I think they actually pulled it off the table. So I don't even think we were around that either. So I don't know. Somebody made a comment on Facebook about Biden and promises having been made and him not making good on those promises and altering and things of that magnitude. And at first I was kind of dismissive, but now I'm kind of like, I don't know. This isn't looking great for Biden. He made a lot of promises, especially to black folk. And I can't say that he's not making good on it, but at the same token, and I've always said this, I feel that the Republicans are very strategic. They don't think for just today. They think about how do we set the stage for what we want to see happen in the next 5 years. And I feel like that's what they're doing, with these absentee ballot amendments they're making, with some other bills I've seen them pass. They're setting the stage.
Well, there is a federal initiative there too. But really quick before we get off of this one, they're also trying to modify the child tax care credit and stuff as well. So it's this is it's not an omnibus bill, but I feel like it's pretty close to an omnibus bill, which is where they just try to tackle 1,000,001 issues in one. Mm-hmm. I do think that whatever they come up with, though, Biden will sign. I don't see Biden vetoing any relief package. He wants relief, period. But he doesn't have the power to do this. Congress is supposed to make the laws. We always say this. Yeah. Congress is supposed to be making the laws and doing the stuff. So they have to do the stuff, and all he can do is say yes or no once it's totally done.
I think we're back to, for me, and some of my friends talking about this. We're back to, you guys said that once we gave you Warnock and Ossoff, we would be good. You guys just kind of pass stuff through. So how are we still with the back and forth stuff at this point? I tried to explain it the best I could, but they also look at me with the side eye nah, they told us. So we got to be careful. And I say we, I mean Democrats, we got to be careful the things you say to people, because once you say these things, the average American does not follow politics to that extent to understand what that means. So when you say, if you put Warnock and Ossoff in office, we good. We rule the Senate, we rule the House. That's not exactly how that works. And Maya kind of went to that last Friday. That's not exactly how that works per se, because I think people are still sitting around going, how are we still fighting about this when we gave y'all control of everything? Like, it's.
Yeah, well, I mean, and as Maya Dillon-Smith was speaking on last week, like, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have full control over, over
right.
the
We
Senate.
have a tie-breaking vote.
Yeah,
but the challenge is that a bill has to be done before it can be voted on, and so all of these amendments are delaying the bill potentially being done. And we've talked like a big. I feel like the keyword of the term for the Obama administration was like filibuster, because that's when we saw folks making it a habit to just stand at the well and just take up their entire time and not say anything, just to delay the process. Like all those little sabotaging tactics that I think what people have to remember in aggregate is that whether at the federal level or the state level, especially in Georgia, the legislative committee, their processes are set up to kill bills. And the reason for this is because every 2 or 4 years, every 2 years in this case, it cannot be the case that things are turned completely upside down. It cannot be the case that, like, with every new 2 years, midterm election, we've got all new people in there and they just decide to, like, rip up everything from the old and start everything again. The process is designed to kill bills, to make it very hard to pass bills, and to make it very hard to pass bills without everybody on board. Like, consensus is the goal, even if no progress is made, and that's the way the system is. And that's why it's like, there's a 2/3 rule or a 50 plus 1 rule. It's because that is hard to achieve. And so that's something people have to keep in mind, is that the system's kind of set up to be hard, which is why, for a whole administration, a president may have like 1 or 2 bills to hang their hat on, but they're there for 4 years. But that's all they can really speak to, because it is so hard to pass bills.
And especially with this like COVID relief bill, is going to be very hard to like try to stop the bill from being passed in general. So like this is them trying to prolong the process so that they can actually, make it fit their agenda, because there's really no way to stop it at this point. This is a bill that was, drafted by our president that, he released to the. So this is not something that's just
and
randomly
the same
voted
desperation
on
that makes Democrats say, well, they've got to pass it. Like, this is serious. This is urgent. Is the same thing that Republicans are counting on. Like, y'all really need this. So let's just settle.
Which is the frustrating part, because it's not even either one. It's the American people needing the relief. That's the frustrating part. Like this is also the scary part for me. It's like when you think about the first bill they passed under Trump, it was like it went through like that between both sides. Like, so now it's like, well, now we're giving you guys more power. Why is it harder for y'all to get it done? It's just, I don't, when you really look at it and break it down, and I was driving to the studio today, I was thinking, I was like, wow, I really feel like we're almost the same third world countries we spent time developing and so on and so forth. I feel like we've become those third world countries. Like, there's so much strife, there's so much division between the two parties that are supposed to get together to pass legislation to affect and, in essence, help the American people. Now everybody's set to their own devices. The Republicans are really starting to show where their agendas show at. Democrats, like you said, are so desperate to get things passed. It's just like, but there doesn't seem to be an impasse. Yeah. And at the end of the day, the impasse is supposed to affect the American people. And especially in this particular time with COVID still running rampant, I don't get it. Like, I'm confused, and I feel like we have become a third world country. Not to mention the fact that we're in grocery stores with masks on. I'm just saying. Like, it's just, I feel like we're in a third world country. I feel like we literally almost start over. America has started over. It's crazy to me.
But so talking about long term, but to stay at the federal level here, is like the House Democrats with passing the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, like in his honor, is what I think a big part of what they're trying to do, trying to make voting a right. We always talk about how voting is not a right. When people say, like, it's my right to vote, it's like they're kind of lying. It's just what we've always been told, but it's not necessarily your right to vote. That right was never universal. It only existed for a small group of people, and all we've been able to do for the last several hundred years is just slowly peel back who those people are, but it was never supposed to be everyone's right. So they are trying to pass a law now. The bill adopted pretty much along party lines, which we did have the majority, and that's why it passed the House, is this voting rights bill, trying to make it really, really hard for them to, quote unquote, purge anybody from the rolls, trying to increase voter participation. Like, that's what they're trying to do. And I think a lot of that is in response to all the other people, all the other states, who are trying to pass their own laws, because states manage their own elections, and they're trying to in a sense, change that. Yeah. It's a 791-page bill. No, I've not read the entire thing. I bet you your representative hasn't read the entire thing either, because it's just that long. But it's also it's a It's a bulk bill, which I think is smart because they're trying to attack gerrymandering. They're trying to attack funding and political campaign or contributions laws. So they're trying to really beef this up. And my bet is that they're doing that, of course, because once it's picked at by Republicans and once it's like sawed off, there won't be but so much left. You're never going to make me understand why voting isn't a right, why we can't amend our Constitution to ensure that. So I definitely have no qualms about it. But that's a long-term game plan because they're all just got in there. So they have no, immediate incentive, even though I know that in Congress you're always fundraising. This is a long-term strategy.
And I think the reason why voting hasn't really become a right for everyone is because they want to really ensure that voter suppression doesn't become unconstitutional. Because once voting becomes a right for everyone, then you cannot infringe upon that right based off the Constitution. So any other voter suppression law, like any of these House bills that are going forth that are trying to limit how voting is being done, that would technically be considered unconstitutional by the Supreme Court if they were to, file it as a lawsuit. So I think that's something to consider also. Like if we include voting as a right, it basically kind of takes some of the rights that states really have in order to like change their own voting system. It doesn't really give states the power to control their own elections.
Well, I said you give them rights, and then you can't take them away. Especially if you give them rights in an actual constitution, you can't take it away.
But this just goes to show, like, the power delay between like the federal government and the state government, and what the state really has control over versus what the federal government has control over. But to speak on what Simone was saying about the 719-page bill, with this relief bill, Republicans are actually having it being read out loud. 628 pages. It's another tactic.
You can
628 pages has to be read out
and
loud.
Donuts is in that room.
Exactly.
Cocaine.
I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, this just shows that they're trying to be spiteful. They're trying to, have these sections to make sure. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, I don't see the purpose of it. Like, I don't see the purpose of it.
They don't like the numbers. They don't want it passed. I think it's a huge bill and they don't want it passed.
Yeah.
I mean,
so
what was
they agreed to, what was it, 600 million or something, a nominal figure. That's what Senate Republicans wanted.
Well, one of the articles I read, they were saying one of the other issues is how much money they're giving to state governments, and they were saying that most of that money, they feel like Democrats were funneling most of that money to the Democratic governors because most of them shut their cities down longer than the Republicans. So it was like, well, they'll get the bulk of the money because they've been shut down longer, so they'll need it the most. And I was like, wow, we really going down to that? That's one of the things we're looking at? Like, y'all tripping. Like, I feel like there's still this boldness that was there when Trump was in office that they could really do and say what they want to do. And I feel like they're still riding on the heels of, we just going to be real blunt with this. We're not passing because it doesn't fit our agenda. And that's just what it is. I feel like that's how they operating at this point. Whereas before it was kind of a little more hidden, so to speak. Well, not so much hidden because we see it, but it wasn't so overt as it is now. It's just like, now, no, we're not passing because we don't like this and we don't like that and it doesn't fit our agenda. I don't think they were that bold before they were under Trump for a while.
I feel like it's gotten a little bit quieter, but I mean, we kind of have to see. Like, there have been a lot of executive orders and a lot of action that Biden has taken so far and that he may continue to take, but this is like the biggest item that they would be signing off on of their entire term, of this term. So I think a lot of people are also just kind of waiting to feel that out and not wanting to rock the boat too soon. I do believe that if there was a compromise struck, even if it was lower, that it would be signed.
How much lower?
Half, maybe half. But I also think it could help for all Democrats to get on the same page. And I have heard continuously from different Democratic officials that it would be better in their mind to have it go past the states and to municipalities because apparently we have that data. But I don't think that's a good idea. I mean, local control is kind of their like rebuttal argument, like just make it even lower so it goes straight to the points that you want it to go to and forget the Democratic governors or whatever. But that to me is just like, first of all, that's usually not how federal funding works. They usually always flow to the state. And secondly, I think that that's dangerous for Democrats need to have one accord about what should be done. And I do think that the more they squabble about the means or about disparities and things like that, I do think that they're only hurting their own argument. There's got to be a single united front about what the best solution is, period. They agree about the problems, but they don't seem to agree on the solutions.
Well, I will say that in the bill, the tax credit would go from $2,000 to up to $3,600 for a year. So that's what they were looking at.
Yeah, I mean, how do you feel about the $80,000 phase out? That salary, in which you can't receive. What is it?
I think that's good math. Because also, I'm trying to find an article about good old Elizabeth Warren and wanting to tax the rich and make them put their portion into the pool. But we'll get to that a little later on.
Well, my issue was more that I think for this election, suburban Democrats really saved Biden. I think that he got a chunk of the vote, not just from Black people who had incredible turnout, although our turnout did make a huge difference, but out of the white Americans who did vote and who were conservative or moderate, those suburban areas, I think, also played a really big role in this. And I'm thinking about, a class of voters whose salaries are probably 80. So I'm curious, too, about whether or not maybe it's just not his primary concern. Maybe it's not their primary concern. But, income-wise, to me, it would make sense that the phase-out would have been adjusted just a little bit. But maybe this is another compromise that Republicans are hopefully going to support. I'm not sure.
I don't know. When they had that discussion about income versus wealth, when we had Robert and Danahan, she brought that notion of income versus wealth. I mean, when you get above 80,000, that's kind of where you're looking at. It's like, well, if two people in a household are making, one is making 80, the other one's making 60, that's pretty much a lot. I mean, we really want to funnel this down to the people who really need it. So we are talking about people who are making, because remember when Frank was here, he was talking about there are people living in Atlanta living off $10,000 a year.
Oh, yeah.
Like, so we really want to make sure it gets to them. So I can get there. Like, I can get there. Yeah. 80,000, you probably have a nice little nest egg. The likelihood of you not having one, or you have some nice little assets, you might have to liquefy them, but you have some nice assets and stuff. You probably got some stuff put away if you're making 80,000 a year versus somebody who's making 10,000 with 4 kids.
Of course, versus 10,000. But I'm saying why either or? If we're going to spend $2 trillion, which I think we may have to, then why phase it out at 80?
Because I think the objective now is to really get the help to the people that need it. And even with the
I would
the
like
PPP
some COVID
stuff.
relief, and I've yet to get any COVID relief. And I would like the phase out to be higher. It doesn't have to be the same amount. I'm not asking for the same amount of money.
I mean, 80,000 is a lot for a household.
For bills. There are bills.
Then look,
right.
if
There's
you make
student loan debt.
If you making 80,000, your
there
bill should not
and
be
there's
80,000.
student loan debt, and there is health and healthcare costs, which are incredibly expensive.
Yeah, but you're probably leveling all those things off versus somebody who isn't doing it at all.
Nah, you're not.
Imagine
You're not.
making $80,000 and you got a $250,000 education that you got to pay off.
Exactly. There is no money left, and I would like some COVID relief.
Again,
We're gonna
I'm
slow-
inclined to
slow
believe.
move on.
I don't care what either one of y'all say. I'm inclined to believe that if you're making 80,000,
I'm telling you that
you
you're
got
not.
money.
I'm
You have
telling
money
you
in
you're
places.
not. That is not
then
true.
you living above
Income
your means.
versus wealth.
Then you living
Income
above your
versus
means.
wealth. I'm trying to pay debts. Debts.
Okay, fine. I'll say this.
Okay.
For $80,000, we're talking about priorities, right? In theory, we're talking about priorities. Bills are priorities. So we're talking about priorities. We're talking about somebody who's making $80,000 a year, where your priority list may consist of health care for the kids, maybe daycare, stuff like that. If you're under that line, your priorities are probably what meal can I not cook, or what food can I buy from the grocery store? Do I have enough money to buy fruits and vegetables, or do I have to buy knickknacks and snacks because they're cheaper? Two different realms. So no, I'm not getting on that train. I'm okay with that.
I don't want to compare 80. This is what the elite want. They want people who earn 70 to 80 to be bickering with people who earn 10 to 20.
I'm
really talking about people who make 400,000, can't even say it because I've never made it. $400,000 a year. That's the pool I'm talking about.
Okay, well, we're talking about minorities. There are not a lot of us in that field. So
why?
first and foremost. So we're not even talking about probably 2% of the African American population at $400,000 a year. Let's be very clear.
Well,
let's be very clear.
That's true, but there is a district in Buckhead in which the median,
a whole district.
The median income is $300,000.
A whole district.
I'm just
again, not even 1% probably of the the percent of African Americans.
Income
the median
is
$300,000.
Wow.
Buckhead is the exception to any rule most of the time. So we're not even about to go there.
Anyway.
Again, my point is priorities for people. We talking about people not being able to feed their families and having to decide whether I can make a meal that has an appropriate number of proteins and starches versus it being all snacks, because that's all I can afford.
The proteins,
two different arguments, two different sides of the spectrum. So if the objective is to make sure this money funnels down to exactly the people that need it, and we have to peel off some of the other folks who may be able to get by a little longer, I'm okay with it being that.
Okay, so one last thing that I want to make sure I mention.
Defense rests.
I made my case, Your Honor.
So one other amendment to the COVID relief bill is that unemployment benefits will be available through September.
Yay!
The changes to those benefits, though, are instead of it being $400 a week, it'll be $300 a week.
No, it's going to be the opposite. It's supposed to go from 3 to 4. That's what they wanted. Now the Republicans are trying to say leave it at 3, but Democrats want to put it at 4. It'd be $400 for federal assistance.
Yeah. Well, right now they're voting on Republicans have introduced this amendment, and they're voting on it to be at 3 instead of 4.
I mean, I get it. So either one is fine with me. Either one is fine. I'm not even front. I get it, and either one is fine with me.
I wish, me personally, but I'm not eligible for anything included in this relief bill, being the fact that I am a college student.
I must say you live on campus, so you're all right.
Well,
you all right.
Let's unpack that, shall we?
You can, but
let's unpack that.
That's fine. But remember, I live on campus too, so let's go.
I mean, yes, I live on campus, but I live on Clemson University's campus, and I also live in the newest apartment building that was built on our campus. Therefore, the equivalent to live there for about 6 months is like paying $1,200, $1,400 worth of rent, which is clearly outrageous for, I'm a 21-year-old with no work experience. I have a high school diploma.
Let me ask you a question.
What amount of money could I make to pay for that?
Yeah, but are you paying for that?
In reality, I'm not paying that.
You're not paying for that
because I have a full scholarship. I know some people who go to Clemson University with me who don't have a full scholarship. Their parents have to swipe their card for their tuition. They have to take out loans and this, that, and the third. And I'm just like, we really are the demographic of people who need it. Not necessarily saying we need it the most, because I feel like if you are in college, you have some type of assistance, being the fact that you have financial aid and things like that. So you do have some type of assistance to kind of offgate that. But we are part of the demographic of people who do need it, because college students live at a very low income with very high expenses.
Yeah, but you do realize that comes with the college experience.
Yeah, I would
a pint of milk in the grocery store on campus costs like $4 and some
change.
Hell,
a pint of milk at Walmart costs $4. I went there yesterday. It's $4.
No,
Walmart is $4. Yes, I went there yesterday. It's $4.
The prices are so inflated on
But
our
I would
campus.
agree that no, college students do not need it.
No,
they don't. But
what?
No.
Yes, we do.
Y'all are not the first. Y'all won't be the last.
I'm one of the bro.
We've all done it.
Look. Anybody watching this who wants to donate to my own stimulus,
I'm sorry. I love you, but you're not making a case for that. You're not making a case for that. That's not happening. I will definitely say that. But I will say that your generation is a generation that kind of can make better decisions than we were able to make. Because in my day, it was you got to get a degree. You have to. It wasn't you had to get a degree. Now you guys, they're presenting back the other options they took from us. They used to at one time promote vocational schools, become a plumber, become an electrician. Then there was a way that said, no, everybody should go to 4-year schools. That's what it should be. Now they're bringing back those options and presenting those options better to you guys, so y'all guys can say, no, I don't want to get a 4-year degree. I'm going to be an electrician. I'm good with it. They took that away from that middle generation. So you guys, and then y'all can make the decision and say, you know what, I don't want to go to school. Because I could do other stuff, and so
but the only window is that we can make the decision to file like as independent, which would in turn would not be a good idea for
everyone
me personally.
Can make that decision.
Well, not everyone, but you have to be emancipated. And me personally, I'm not, and I can't file independently.
You don't need to.
So therefore, I would not be able to receive a stimulus check. But yet, if I was not emancipated, but I still actually paid, all of my own expenses, I wouldn't be able to receive a stimulus check either way, because I'm technically a dependent of someone, which is not. That shouldn't be.
My Aunt Carolyn. Yes.
No, it shouldn't.
You only need a certain amount.
But everyone's situation does not look like mine. I guess I'm just being more considerate of people who wouldn't be in my situation.
I mean, if
but
people
at the same
are not
time,
in your situation, but they're dependent, then and the way that our system is set up is that the people who are the independents, the adults, are expected to deliver some level of relief to their children, meaning that they can't just sit on a COVID check and starve the kid. So the idea is that if you live in that household, you're supposed to be taken care of. Now, if you're not, there are the courts. And I do recommend people go to the courts and seek emancipation, but aid can't be delivered per person, it has to go per household, which is why even if it's even if you're not related to people, if they're in your household and they're dependents in your household, then they're supposed to be taken care of based on you being taken care of.
And unfortunately, dear cousin, we're talking about...
my goodness, this doesn't have nothing to do. But
unfortunately, my dear little cousin, we're talking about priorities. Unfortunately, college is still a choice. You don't have to go to college. It's a choice.
You don't, but Ricardo, you are wrong about, even though the conversation is changing, the economy is not caught up with the conversation of alternative options for after high school. It is still the wealthiest people in this country, the highest earners in this country are still people who have at least a 4-year degree. That's still the case. So I'm glad that the conversation is changing, but things have not moved in line. Banks are not lending to people at higher rates if they don't have a 4-year degree. Employers are not hiring those people that don't have a 4-year degree. Investors are not funding people who don't have a 4-year degree, even if they are entrepreneurs. So it is still, even though we've got cases here and there of this person and that person and that person, I don't think the economy really supports that still.
Well, but that's my thing though.
Or
If a lot of people decide to start going in those fields, which are beyond necessary at this point, and I find it funny that now they realize that there are not enough laborers to build these houses y'all want to sell so badly because y'all decided to stop talking about vocational schools. If we got a lot more people to go on those things, they go into it making $80,000 and $60,000, $60,000 to $80,000 out the gate going into those fields. So the likelihood of you needing a loan out the gate versus somebody having a 4-year degree and having to need those loans to get the jump off. When you go into a field making $80,000 out the gate, you don't need that jump off. So you have time to build that capital and kind of do it your own way. So that's my thing. And the fact that these conversations are coming back up is really what I meant.
I'm glad.
That they're coming back up. Me too, because I was like, we should have never stopped talking about it, especially in our communities. We're very hands-on people.
Well, we shouldn't have been steering primary education toward liberal arts. We shouldn't have been steering, 12 years worth of knowledge to liberal arts, to how well you can read or write or speak, and only read or write or speak, and take history there are some countries in which you don't take history every single year. There's a certain amount of history you need to know, and once you've known it, there's no need to continue to study it. And they do offer functional life skills, and they consider that a part of basic education, and that you're kind of an illiterate person if you don't have functional life skills, like building things, or like budgeting things, or like a lot of things that a lot of our graduates can't do. So,
but that's what they're calling for. People
it needs
are calling
to be
for.
But that is a bill under the Gold Dome right now. At least there's a bill trying to address that, to make financial literacy a requisite to graduate high school.
Well, I think that's what everybody's saying. The reality is a lot of things, the world has changed, but some of the way we do things has not changed. So that's why now they're really getting on people about curriculums. You know, these curriculums need to be more reflective of the economy we live in. You know, people being able to balance a checkbook, people being able to understand, when you're actually in poverty and how to get out of it. We have to bring these things back. Government. What are the 3 branches of government? Like, I would love people to know these things again. Like, I don't. Look back, I look back because I'm 40. When I look back and go, how did we get away from these things? Like, these are practical, living, working, breathing knowledge skill sets. How do we manage to get away from these things? Like, it's the silliest thing to me.
I don't know where the priorities came from, but,
These poor kids in cursive writing, like, there's going to be a spot where you're going to have to print your name and sign your name. And if they never taught you cursive,
may just be
for right now,
eye scanning.
And right now, you still have to sign your name and print your name. Well, if we never taught you cursive, how you gonna sign your name?
I was never taught how to write in cursive. My mom, of course, took the time to teach me herself. But like in school, I was never taught how to write in cursive. I was never taught how to type, like using the homeroom, with the fingers placed on the homeroom keys. There were just certain technical skills that we did not learn. Like it wasn't really a part of our curriculum, So I'm just like,
and to me, life skills too, like knowing that your tires are bald. Why are you driving around on bald tires, and how dangerous that is, or knowing how to check your oil, and to even change it yourself, which you can definitely do. Yeah, so some things are life skills, Cooking food all the way through, so you ain't eating raw. Meat cooking period.
Knowing how to cook a wide variety of dishes instead of it just being ramen noodles, hamburger, helper.
I think that should be a definite requisite, and it's just helpful. It's just helpful.
Well, the issue with home ec was, that women felt like, well, why we got to be the ones that steer to these home ec classes. I mean, I want to be home pregnant with.
The answer should have been that everyone should, not just that women only. It should
have been called like managing a home. It should be called managing a life, because that's what it is. You're living. You're learning how to live properly,
how to commute, how to get around, how to iron a damn shirt.
Well, sorts of things. This conversation gets more complicated. Then you got to start factoring in transgenders and people of that magnitude. This conversation.
No, it doesn't. That's the problem. Is that it's a life skill for a human being.
For a human being, there should be no gender roles or any of that associated with things like.
I can ask y'all 2 questions right now that would break that ideology that you just said.
Go ahead.
Who typically takes home economics? Typically.
Home economics.
Yeah. When it was called home economics, who typically took that? What was the stigma with that class?
I've never heard of that. I was born in 2000.
God, I forgot you don't count. Jesus. Simone. You ain't got to think about it. It's not a hard question.
But I guess I already know. I don't see what you're getting at.
My point.
What I'm saying is that everyone should have taken it. The solution should not have been to take it out. It should have been to spread it around, to make it everyone's course.
I'm just saying that the way people think. People thought that home economics was for girls and shop and stuff like that was for boys.
This is why we have to. This is why it's important to my generation to break these gender norms. because it shouldn't be a boy thing or a girl thing.
And they should not be cutting physical activity.
I'm like, anybody should know how to put a shelf up in their house or something like that if that's what you wanted. Anyone should know how to cook if you want to eat.
I mean, the information's there if they want to go get it.
But it's advertised to people. Yeah, it was advertised to like cooking and things like that, or home economics or whatever you called it. It was clearly advertised towards women because that's what they expected women to do: is sit in the house and cook and take care of a child and manage a home.
And I believe weapons management should be taught as well.
It should.
If we all have a Second Amendment right, I don't believe that we should have to wait until we're adults and potentially criminally liable to learn how to operate a firearm. I think that should be taught in a closed environment, trained environment.
And we play with the fake guns and twirl them around in ROTC. So I'm like, and you teach us how to improperly use
that makes me nervous. That makes me nervous.
But then when we get in person and I see a firearm,
it can be a life-saving skill.
That makes me nervous.
A life-saving skill.
That makes me nervous. What if a white supremacist ends up being the teacher in this weapons class? Like stuff like that. Stuff like that. Don't give me that look. That stuff can happen. A white supremacist ends up being the gun teacher.
To things like this, like a riflery class could be, half of it could be hands-on, half of it can be instruction. Half of it can be like learning, trigger safety and things like that. Learning how to
driving class. My God, a driving class.
Driver's ed.
That's not mandatory.
Well, it's never.
That's not in schools.
Well,
it should be mandatory.
Well, it never was, but they gave an incentive because if you finished it, you got to discount your insurance.
Everyone didn't know how to drive. And it is evident.
Are you sure? Because Wade Hampton had it.
You were born in like 19. Yeah.
You want to try that again?
In 2000.
You want to try that again?
We don't have driver's ed. No, we didn't have driver's ed
at all. Unless you had the money and your parents just wanted to do it for you.
Wait, are you saying y'all don't have it? You saying this? Are you saying it's not offered? Or are you saying
it's not offered at all? In Estill, South Carolina, at Estill High School, it is not offered at all.
Really? It wasn't offered to mine either. But you can look out there and see that people can't drive.
Okay, well, Atlanta's a bad place to because people can't drive. And remember, it's a lot of transplants, so we can't really put that on Atlanta. People came here not being able to drive.
Responsibility. Well, I think that should be requisite. But anyway, kids should be at the right age. That should be a part of a class. Is like learning how to drive. I just think that's critical.
I mean, I agree. I took driver's ed, thank God, because I do know how to parallel park, and most people can't. So I don't like to, but I do know how. So I agree. Yeah. But I digress.
Okay, let's go to the state.
All right.
So voting bills. We'll talk about those first. So we talked a lot about HB 531. Was adopted by the House on March 1st. It sets a deadline of 11 days prior to Election Day to apply for an absentee ballot. Previously, that deadline was 6 months, if you recall. It requires you to have a driver's license number and a copy of a photo or a copy of another ID. You have to cast the absentee ballot. If you don't have the personal identifying information, you have to have a copy. The drop boxes are being restricted, so there won't be any amount that the state wants to set. It will be a formula of how many drop boxes there can be. And depending on that number, no matter what the number, they'll still have to be at actual voting locations. It can't just be, anywhere else. They limited Sunday voting, and they have prohibited the distribution of food and beverages to voters waiting in line to cast their vote.
Which I thought was disgusting when I saw that. I was like, how does that even become a thing?
Makes no sense.
How do we even get there?
How do you argue for it? So
that older folks like to vote because they feel like it's their right, so they probably want to go to the polls. And when they're out there, they may not have enough snacks or water to last them 3 hours that it takes them to vote. Like, I don't understand. How is that something that's attackable? That's the part that threw me. I was like, so we really looking at this, that people who bring the people that are voting, particularly the elderly,
food and water.
Food and water. How is that something that we feel like is a crime or something we shouldn't allow them to do?
It's just certainly frustrating when you think about our weather and like what kind of weather we could be dealing with. Like, it is entirely possible that we could have a very hot day. I don't care if it's November 4th, September 4th.
Well, my question is, what is the logic behind it? Like, what was the logic behind even bringing that up?
A lot of the trying to limit the resources that are being used, like when during elections and stuff like that. Like, they're trying to limit as far as like people contributing to campaigns and things like that, or people taking, like, just because you want to see this person in office, you're taking your own money and you're sponsoring, which is not. I don't think it should be criminalized. Me personally,
they do it.
Of course not.
They do it.
Of course not. But the bigger part is just, last time this happened, one of the arguments that was made, and it wasn't a good one, was that a lot of the folks doing this were organizations that are political in nature. So, the ACLU or Fair Fight or whoever else out there, handing out water and food. it just don't matter who it is. It just should not matter who it is. And I don't care if I'm accepting a water bottle from the ACLU. I'm going in there to vote for how I'm going to vote.
Literally.
So that's the quote unquote impetus for this legislation. But that is still a provision in there. It still has to make it to the next chamber, but it will qualify to be heard in the next chamber. So we'll just have to see. We'll have to see. It advances to the Senate. We'll have to see like when it's going to be on the calendar and how that's going to work. Crossover day, again, is this upcoming Monday. So a lot of bills are getting passed and filed really, really rapidly over the next week. There's still SB 241, which is the no excuse absentee ballot one. There's SB 69, Senate Bill 69, which is trying to get rid of the opt-in for the voter registration when you go to the driver's department and trying to make it something that you have to do a whole separate application for rather than like the checkbox. So still plenty of bills moving with regards to voting. And I think the biggest questions are just going to be, how are we going to pivot and how are people going to kind of manage that?
Well, so let me ask you this. So we said all this. We know what that means. Let's strip this down to the average person. Why did this matter to the average person?
Because if you voted...
Especially minority voters. Why does this matter to minority voters?
Which I hope you voted in the last election. This matters because the harder it is to vote, for one thing, the less people will vote. That just follows common logic. Less people will vote, the greater the chances are that your issues and your issues will not be represented and your challenges will not be addressed. So the fact that every state can set their own rules for voting is always been the case. It has not always been the case that after every single election there is this swath of legislation to try to change how voting is done. A lot of people vote by habit. If you're a new voter, and that's wonderful, most people who are regular voters are lifetime voters. They vote as a habit. They just, every 4 years or every 2 years, ideally, maybe even every year for local elections, they vote, and they know where to go, and they know how to do it. When you change the process, you can really trip people up and pull them out of their habits and out of their routines. If they've got a local precinct they always go to, and all of a sudden that's not a thing anymore, that could be the difference between them voting and not voting. If the deadlines have changed, that could be the difference between them voting and not voting. So that's the reason why it makes such a huge difference. And as you become a more regular voter, you'll see that like those sorts of things can really, really impact you. I know you were moving close to the last election time, and it was like there are deadlines about when you can vote in your new precinct versus your old one, and so little changes like that, they make a big difference.
Well, apparently they were talking about the biggest one was the weekends because they were saying that most minority voters vote after they get out of church that Sunday. Which, if you go to church, most of the pulpit preachers are saying, hey, you guys, we got to vote. So after we get out of service, let's all head down to the polls. They're taking buses and stuff. So I think that was one of the biggest ones for most. He was like, so you're affecting the weekend voting, which is when a lot of people vote, because I don't really have to mess with my weekly schedule. I'm already struggling with my kids. I can just get it done on the weekend. So now trying to scale that. Again, when you look at this stuff, it's just like you guys are really being very blatant about this. Like
voter suppression.
Literally, it's not even, you're not being subtle about it anymore. You're just being overt about it. So you're really going to hit the weekends where it's easier for minority people in particular to vote. Because like I said, the preacher says on Sunday, after we done, we get on the buses, we taking the elderly, we rolling down in a team to make sure everybody votes.
And taking away those resources is another big part of this, right? Because it's like, if I know I'm going to have to stand in line for an hour and I can't get a bottle of water, that changes a lot. Or if somebody can't take me there because you can't coordinate or whatever, if you can't fund anything, that changes a lot. And it may be like something a church wants to do is to say, like, I want all my congregants to vote, and everybody's gonna hop on a bus. If that becomes a crime, then not only are you like just stopping those voters, but you're kind of criminalizing an entire community, a faith community. So that it makes a huge difference. And if voting was to be like an actual right, then none of this would even be a conversation because it's a right. So you can't tell somebody not to exercise their rights, to vote.
You can, but you better have a pretty good darn reason to do it, and you better have some good proof. I mean, I guess if they were handing out water bottles,
right. That's why they can do this. It's a privilege.
That's what I'm saying. If they were turning to a right, then it's kind of hard to tell them you can't exercise a right that's been given to me. You can't tell me not to.
Also, if you turn it into a right, then that would kind of like, then the whole clause in I believe it's in the Fourth Amendment, where like people that belong to the state, like state prisoners and things like that, they would have a right to vote there because you don't have any rights when you're in state custody or federal custody or any custody. So it's just like if voting actually become a right, then I personally feel like it should be a right for all, even those that are in state custody and everything like that.
I mean, I certainly do too. But at minimum, they probably could try to require that you aren't currently serving your sentence. Most states have it that way now. I don't know if HR 1 would change that. That's something we should probably look into. But if you're not currently serving your sentence, I know in most states they don't care.
Isn't there a House bill in Georgia that's like trying to restrict voting rights for people who are like already in state custody?
There is a bill trying to make voting a right. There's a resolution and there's an actual bill. A resolution is just a statement to that. So it's not a bill to change anything, but it's to make a statement, and it can be a pre-up to a bill to say that voting just is a right, period, or it's something that you can just do whether you have a felony conviction or not. Senator Harold Jones, who's really, really incredible advocate, is behind a lot of this work, and so is Representative Josh McLaurin, who's incredible. He's a Harvard trained attorney, and he's up in the Sandy Springs area, Democratic representative, and he's behind a lot of this as well, because ideally, if you've committed the crime, you should be able to move on. But if you have a felony conviction, not only can you not vote, you can't sit on a jury, you can't hold a public office, even if you're elected to a public office, things like that. And we all know about the education and housing and all those other challenges. So, making voting right would change a lot. I think civic participation, period, would change a lot. And personally, I think if you've been through the system, you may have a particular emphasis to vote, because there's certain things you care about and that you want to see change. So speaking of, let's get to this next one. As far as being in the system, Pamela Wynn. I don't know if you are familiar with her, but have you heard of you may not have heard of this.
I feel offended. Like, you just changed your whole thought process.
Have you heard of the banning the shackles movement, or the banning shackling movement for the dignity for incarcerated women?
If I say no, I feel like you would be right.
No.
So I don't want to say no.
Okay.
I've heard about it vaguely.
Okay. So this was a movement that started many years ago. Pamela Wynn, who lives in Georgia, is really the champion behind it. She was a registered nurse who was running a business, a healthcare business, and her employees committed the crime. She, as the owner of the business, was also convicted of this white-collar crime, and she spent years in prison. Obviously lost her practice and everything like that, but she also gave birth in prison. If you don't know her story, you should really look it up. It's called The Wynn. She has a documentary. Look up Pamela Wynn, W-I-N-N. Has a documentary that's coming out as well that I was really happy to support. It details her entire story, details the fact that pregnant women in the federal penal system had to give birth in shackles, like shackled to a bed, were ripped from their babies immediately.
Wait, we're not talking about murderers and stuff like that. We're talking about like white-collar crimes.
We're talking about all women who are in prison have to give birth in shackles.
Wait, so if I'm in prison,
before this bill,
if I'm in prison because check writing fraud, I'm shackled to the bed to give birth.
Oh yeah.
For writing bad checks.
Everyone is. It's not a question of violence.
I don't think you get skin to skin contact. Like, they don't put the baby on. You know how, like, when you go in the hospital, they put the baby on your chest to let you build that bond.
Yeah. And states can have their own rules.
For writing
That's
bad
true.
checks.
States can have their own rules, but in Georgia, it's 2 hours that a woman gets with the child after birth. But yeah, before that, the woman could be shackled, and in her story in particular, she lost her child because they were late to deliver her to get her care. So she ended up miscarrying at a full term and losing her child. So for her, it's even more critical. But she's got a bill right now, House Bill 377, that is in the Health and Human Services Committee. And Representative Cooper has been helping to advance that in the House. But she's been the heart and the driving force behind it. And it's trying to remedy some of this. It's trying to say that if a woman is in her second or third trimester, they need to get care. They can't just not receive any care. And they definitely, if they have not committed a violent offense, like you were saying, if it's something that can wait, just let them give birth in a humane environment and then let them serve their sentence. We have things called like deferred adjudication all the time, where if somebody has done something that a judge can say, okay, well, you'll start serving your sentence at X date. So it's not always an immediate thing. And they're saying if this person's on a flight risk and they've only committed one crime, especially if it's especially in her case, let this person give birth in a place where their chances of mortality are not so high, and let the baby come out. I mean, we're a state that apparently passed a heartbeat bill, meaning that we love unborn babies. We value the lives of unborn babies. We value.
Well, you threw that in there.
We value babies, life even in the womb. So why are we allowing these innocent lives to be subject to termination? It doesn't make any sense.
I agree with it. And again, I've been thinking about a lot of stuff lately. Probably have a lot of free time these days. I've been thinking about a lot of stuff lately.
Thinking's not a bad thing.
Well, it is. It becomes annoying. I'm an analytical person, so it's just like dead runs. It's so annoying. But no, I was talking to a female friend, and we were talking about women taking maternity leave. And they were saying, I don't understand why that's not something that's a given. Why is it something we have to fight for? And I was like, when you really think about it, a lot of these spaces are not designed to include women. When we think about the workplace, you think about men. You don't really think about women per se, especially when we get into leadership. When we talk about prisons are not really designed for women.
We're not.
So to think about this, I'm like, it's part of a bigger problem. So I don't know if you're gonna be able to, in essence, like isolate women when you already have a problem with prisons being treated inhumane anyway. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you can be able to isolate the needs of women who are in prison. I don't know. I definitely agree with it, but again, we're already fighting about just getting them good meals and good health care and making sure they're not being indentured servants. So I don't know if you can isolate women and having babies in there when you already have a larger problem with the prison system. So I don't know.
So what do you mean isolate?
Well, just say, I mean, again, this space really wasn't designed for women. So
Right.
to put an
But
optic
women
lens on
are
it,
there.
they are, but
750% spike.
we're really trying to get them treated like humans, let alone having little humans. I don't know. I think it's something a lot bigger that has to be
it's much bigger.
touched on. I don't
it's
know.
much bigger, but this is just the way that change happens. It happens with these like little individual steps, and
Yeah, but I don't know if this is a baby step. I feel like this is a kick in the door step, though. I think we could have started someplace
I personally
else.
feel like this is a baby step because it doesn't really target, as you were saying, there is a bigger picture. You know, we do need to work on actually, treating treating convicts,
Especially women, especially how women are treated. Like, they probably treated like men. Like,
well, I mean, the least we can do is ensure that women won't be susceptible to death, or their babies won't be susceptible to death for just simply being in state custody while having a baby.
Well, yeah,
so
but
I mean, that is something that we can start now, because that is a bill that's actually very dear and near to our hearts right now, being the fact that states are signing heartbeat bills and all kind of stuff like that.
It's also a government transparency issue too, because departments of corrections don't like to release these sorts of numbers, and some claim that they don't have this data. And other states say that they just that they have the data, but there's some legal reason they don't have to release it. But knowing who is pregnant, I think, is the first thing. Knowing who is pregnant and being able to track that information is really important. And right now in the state of Georgia, they do not have to do that. They do not have to disclose that information. So then you're in a situation where it's like, not only could a woman miscarry, but nobody may know that they've miscarried. Like, it's
okay. Well, let me frame this differently, because my thing is, I don't feel like this is a one-step thing. So if we tackle this, then you also have to tackle the progression of what happens to the child after it's born. I don't think this is one you can just like say, okay, you're asking us in essence to cover two people. It's the mother and the child. And then what happens to that progressive timeline once that child is birthed and the mom is still in prison?
She stays in prison.
So what happens to the child?
They're staying either with a relative that's been allowed to keep the child, usually a relative, or they're in state custody, just like everybody else. I mean, that doesn't change anything from the heartbeat bill, which is like, that was the liberal argument, which is, how are you going to make all these women have babies? You have nowhere for them to go. So what are you going to do with these babies if all these women have to have all these babies? They didn't address that answer. They didn't answer that question. They didn't say we're going to overly fund the foster care system. They didn't say they didn't say anything. They just said you have to have them. So why should this be any different? I mean, I would think common sense would say that if you want more babies in the world, that you would provide more funding for them. But that wasn't their common sense then. So why should it be now?
So I mean, how's it looking? How's the bill looking? Like it's going to go through?
It did. It just passed the House, so it is looking good. Again, crossover day is Monday, so next week the Senate will be. They could do it earlier, but no later than next week the Senate will have to consider it as well. And if they like all the language, then they'll approve it. This is actually, I think, a bigger deal than most people know. Even though it is hard to track, like even in the probation hearings that I go to all the time, and I only go in the major counties, which is like Athens, Clark, Gwinnett, and like the surrounding areas. There are at least 19 people per county per day, women who are pregnant, visibly pregnant. And that usually will come up. One of the people I spoke with really frequently, I'm not going to say her name because I don't have permission to use it, was in her second trimester and was sentenced to 90 days, so to basically go up until her term in jail. And she was caught stealing diapers and caught stealing baby supplies and sentenced to a county jail. So previously homeless, but we have to think about that. We have to think about the fact that we're endangering the life of a small baby. And we have to think about the fact that it's COVID, that most states are decreasing their prison populations because it's so dangerous, and it's especially dangerous to be pregnant and in prison during COVID for you and for your child. So
I don't know. That's always just that example is always struggling for me. It's like, well, you don't want to punish her for stealing to provide for her family, but if you let her get away with it, then you open the floodgates. It's like, well, in this such and such case, she got a slap on the wrist. So why is I just feel like it's a slippery slope with that. Like,
there's a difference between getting away with something and being smart about something. So like when somebody is literally unhoused, incarcerating them for a survival sort of purpose isn't solving a problem at all. They're still unhoused. They still lack food. They still lack access to resources. And again, a pregnant person is not just any person. A pregnant person is two people. So you have a
but do
whole
we give
other
them a
life that you're
license?
endangering.
Yeah, but do we
It's
give them
called
a
the deferred
license to go?
adjudication. It's called the deferred adjudication.
Do we give them a license to go, start robbing stores because they're pregnant? It's too
No,
late.
it's called the deferred adjudication.
What does that mean to me?
A deferred adjudication is a suspension of a sentence. It's like something that judges do very, very often for a crime that is a nonviolent crime. Is to say, if for any reason, whether you're for any reason, that you can start your sentence at X date, and a deferred adjudication would at least preserve the life and the safety of the unborn child, even if it means that the mother has to be punished in the future. So, and again, she's just one example, but there are dozens in a single county of pregnant women. And if the state isn't going to be responsible for the death of that child, I really don't think that the state should be trying to keep people in custody that it doesn't have the resources to take care of.
Yeah.
That's why some jails are in trouble right now, actually, just because they don't have the resources to take care of people. And you don't have a right to incarcerate people and then dehydrate them or, everything else that's happened right in Cobb County. Okay, last couple.
All right.
Citizens arrest. HB 497, that was yesterday that the House Judiciary and Civil Committee discussed that bill. Lots of really good reps behind it. Representative Chuck F. Strachan and Burt Reeves spoke to it. The Reverend Georgia NAACP.
NAACP?
NAACP. Reverend.
Wow, why is Woodard?
Woodard. I was going to say Woodall. Woodard. All came and all testified on behalf of the bill. Christopher Bruce from the ACLU came to testify on behalf of the bill. Everyone was really excited to see the bill. They couldn't believe. Generally speaking, even the governor was like, I can't believe this law is still in the books. It needs to go away. So,
all right, just to refresh people's drink, what are we talking about? What is the citizen arrest?
We're talking about the Citizens Arrest Statute, which is a provision in Georgia's code that dates back to England, in which individuals had to assist with the apprehension of criminals because there was no uniformed police force, essentially. And so it was very common for a person to apprehend someone.
Vigilante justice comes to mind.
Well, in those days, it may have been...
it was necessary in those days.
Right.
Now it's just vigilante justice, and this parallels to the Ahmaud Arbery case. So that's why this matters, because we saw this firsthand.
But he's not the only case. The challenge is just that it's not reported on, because what happens is that officers do have to arrive at some point, and when they arrive, the case is classified as whatever the charge was, if it was valid. So we don't know how many times somebody has tried to use it. We know they tried to use it here because the whole world found out. But I'm sure it's been invoked in defense in other cases. Right in Clayton County, we talked about this a lot of times with Hannah Payne, a 63-year-old black man who was gunned down because she thought he broke a law and chased him down and shot him. So, it's people try to use it all the time. I think it's important because it's a law that, again, is ripe for abuse. Emboldens people, makes people feel like they need to play cop, makes people feel like they need to go handle things that have nothing to do with them. And, if we want to better police community relations, we need to let police do their jobs and not assign citizen police. Especially let ourselves assign ourselves as citizen police. So to me, it's just that simple.
Well, I want people to think about the reality of it is that there are a lot of, and I say this all the time, there are a lot of things that are actually law that we don't know because we don't research. But people who are getting ready to do something foolish, they know. So it's like in this whole debacle we talking about, they knew that this was still in the book, so they felt they were in their rights to do what they want to do. That's why these kind of things are important, people. Because a lot of us don't read, myself included, a lot of us don't research enough to know what's written, not what's enforced, what's written. So if they ever decide they want to enforce it, it is a legal law. Like, hey, if I'm exercising my right to citizen's arrest, it's on the books.
Yeah.
So that's why these kind of things are important.
Yeah.
That, we get these things off the books because they're no longer necessary. They don't fit the world we live in.
And you know what came up in my mind, like despite somebody who hasn't said they're using citizen's arrest, is all those other viral videos from all these people who've been, quote unquote, stopping black people that they don't know. The young woman with her condo association who stopped the black man at the door because he tried to follow somebody in and she didn't see his key fob and she demanded to see his key fob. This went viral because he recorded it. And he just kept trying to walk past her and tell her to leave him alone. She followed him all the way to the elevator, all the way up to his floor. He's like, what are you doing here? She was like, well, if you're my neighbor, if you really live here, tell me, introduce yourself to me. Like, I don't know who you are. Like, you don't have a key fob. I don't know who you are. Followed him all the way to his front door until he closed it. There's several cases like that of people just trying to stop people from physically leaving a space because they're like, who are you or where are you from?
Entrapment.
Right. That is detainment. Yes, it is. It is stopping someone from physically leaving a space. And that they haven't used the term citizen's arrest, but that's what all these people call themselves trying to do, to be totally honest.
And a lawyer will probably make a case for it. So that's why, again, we have to get these kinds of frivolous laws off the books because people, it's not about what's enforced. It's also about what's written. And if people know what's written and they know that they can get away with it, they're going to. So that's why this stuff really matters, especially this particular one. That's why it really matters. Because this vigilante justice thing, like you said, I'm sure this happens a lot, but the Ahmaud Arbery case put it front and center.
For sure.
That people are still using that defense or trying to use that defense to, in essence, do what they want to do. So we got to get these things off the books.
Implicit biases, basically.
Right.
Like, that's really what I see it as. I'm just like, just because you have some type of implicit bias or just because you have some type of conflict of interest,
you don't recognize me.
It's like you.
Really killed me.
It's like it gives them some type of probable cause, and I'm like, they're like. I feel like there should at least be, at the very minimum, there should at least be some type of like probable clause, like some type of amendment.
For officers, there are.
Well, I mean, of course, for officers
so
there
crazy.
are, but I'm just like for like there should be some type of amendment to like change the way that people are actually trying to enforce this law. Like they should not be able to just stop someone just because you don't recognize them and you live in this building. That does not give you a right to. You get what I'm saying? Like, it
well, one of the bills that was on its way that the Georgia Black Legislative Caucus filed for this session was to make it criminal for to call 911 with racial bias or racial motivation.
I remember hearing about that one.
So. Which is totally fair, but again, it's just like we got to do a lot more community action. Who's stopping people that they don't know, that they don't recognize, or that they think are just that whole thing just needs to stop. That entire thing of just like seeing people and engaging people that you don't know because you feel like you have a right to know who they are. That whole just needs to stop. Period. And I don't know who needs to do that. I don't know if white allies need to do that. To white non-allies, I don't know who needs to be the messenger for that message, but that message just needs to get out here. Even if you don't call the police, it's a problem to me.
Again, when we speak of vigilante justice, which is how I define all this crap, I just get really nervous because it usually does not play well for us. So I'm not a fan of vigilante justice. Let the police do their jobs. That's scary to say too, but yeah. And then like you said, these biases. The police have a standard
the police have a standard. The police and all of our communities and every single day are not necessarily making headlines. The headlines that we see are the headlines that we see, and they have something to be accountable to. But people don't in this statute. There is no probable cause. There is no de-escalation procedures by the department. There is no peace officer training. There's no training. Period. These are people with guns who are waiting to find someone that they can find suspicious or who just steal.
That looks like their idea of a threat.
Right,
That's what it's like. Once you match that idea of a threat, then it's like this law enables you to act on that.
Right.
Even though there may not be no real sign of threat.
Exactly.
All right. So in our last couple of seconds, I did see Coming to America 2. I don't know why it says Coming to America. I don't know why it says. I kept taking me to the first one. In any event, and everybody know how picky I am about movies, especially sequels. But I have to say kudos to them. They did an amazing job. I'm not even gonna lie. I actually thought it was better than the first one. It was just really well thought out, really well executed, and it really did exemplify Black excellence. Almost on the same level as Black Panther, just in a different way. Like the way that they set the scenes, the story they told. And I was telling you guys before we got on air, I was like, the emergence of beautiful brown people makes me feel great. Like there were some beautiful women in this storyline, from Akeem's oldest daughter to the girl that ends up, I don't give it away, another girl that I don't give it away. It's another girl who ends up playing a very important part. These are gorgeous Black women. I mean, brown women. Love light-skinned women because, Lisa's still there and she looks amazing. But to see beautiful brown young women in these roles playing great parts, I was blown away by it. That's one of the things that really made me love it. So if you have not seen Coming to America, I don't care what the naysayers say. Y'all know how picky I am. Watch it on Amazon Prime. It's amazing. I love it. I'm probably going to watch it again this weekend. Shouts out Tiana Taylor because I'm not her biggest fan, but she did a really good job in this. She did a really good job. So, I digress. Final thoughts.
Okay, well.
You got to have one, so you seem surprised. I caught you off guard.
I don't know. I didn't have any final thoughts today. I don't know.
That's fair.
I mean, I enjoy the conversation as always. And I feel like these are some really, really important topics. These are almost kind of like life-changing topics because they really change the dynamic for how we will execute policies in the future and how we execute, things like citizens arrest and how voting is going to change. These are things that's going to change for generations to come. So I'm excited to see what actually is, signed and what actually set into law. So
right. No, it's going to say the exact same thing. Just pay attention to some of these bills, especially HB 531, HB 377, HB 272, which we didn't get to cover, is about juvenile justice and raising the age for juveniles to be tried in adult court. Kind of follow these bills, and what I'm going to challenge everybody to do as well is to pay attention to who's running for re-election and what they say they do and didn't do. Like, pay attention to who's voting no to some of these things that you know are so critical, because sometimes, you know, these bills have to go through and people know that they're going to pass and they'll go ahead and vote their conscience. But, like, let's pay attention to who is trying to block these bills and who's pushing these bills. Like Representative Barry Fleming with the voting filibuster. And just kind of see what happens when he runs for re-election and how he justifies that. Because I think you'll find people's memories are short, and people will, you know, run for re-election claiming to have done all of these things, assuming that we've forgotten, and sometimes we do. So let's see if we can't, you know, keep our memory fresher.
And as always, you know, these things matter. And that's our job. Our new job here is to tell you why these things matter and empower you to be able to help us or help our communities, you know, move forward to get the justice and meet our needs and all that good stuff. So we will see you guys next Friday. I think Maya will be back with us next Friday. But we'll see you guys next Friday, same time, same place on the Leadership Plan live podcast with your host, Ricardo D. Rice.